Welcome to Assembly Calendar. I'm Ted Flint. With us today is Assemblywoman Nicole Malliotakis, who serves District Number 64, Staten Island and Brooklyn represented. Nice to have you, Assemblywoman.
Thank you.
Let's start the program talking about an issue that is it can be divisive. It is very emotional, and people are passionate about their views. The New York Dream Act and whether we should provide free college tuition to the children of illegal aliens. Now, you have your own legislation as an alternative to that.
Yeah, I believe that our state's primary focus should be on the citizens that elected us to represent them. And what my legislation would do as an alternative to the DREAM Act would be provide that funding to expand the tuition assistance program so our middle-class families can qualify. Back in 2000 was the last time we increased the household eligibility cap. So that was from 50,000 household income to 80,000, and I want it to go from 80,000 to 100,000. And I've introduced legislation with Senator Lanza to do that because it hasn't been adjusted in 15 years. So many families who are struggling and taking on a tremendous amount of debt are not eligible for a tuition assistance program of New York. Additionally, I have also legislation with Senator Lanza that would reinstate the tuition assistance program for graduate students, which was eliminated in 2010 and has yet to been restored. And so if you're a graduate student here in the state of New York, you get absolutely no assistance. And I certainly think that should be the priority of our legislature and governor.
So you're raising the cap, you're proposing raising the cap to $100,000 for a family of, does it matter, 4 or 6?
Yeah, it could be a family of 4. I mean, if you're a family of 4 or 5, or you know, if you're a couple with 3 children and you have to put those 3 children through college, you can't do so with the other middle class expenses that a typical family has, including a mortgage and property taxes and water bills, etc. So what this would do would just adjust that income eligibility, which hasn't been done in 15 years, so we could see more middle class families who are currently struggling, whether it's a parents working multiple jobs to put their children through school, or whether it's a single mother who's working and going to school part-time in the evening. I mean, what this would do is just benefit the citizens of our state, and I really think that they should be the priority, and we should not be moving forward with the DREAM Act, but instead we should be adopting these laws that would benefit citizens and legal residents of our state.
And you have a Senate companion bill in the Senate.
Yes.
Very good.
Senator Lanza is the Senate sponsor, so on both. All
right, very good. Let's talk about an issue I know you feel very strongly about, human trafficking. And this bill was bottled up in codes for years, part of a 10-point package. Was voted on its own merits, this bill.
Yeah, we were real excited about what took place during session when this bill, which had sort of been held hostage by the previous speaker, finally came to the floor for a vote. I think this is one of the first signs that our change in leadership is actually benefiting the entire state of New York. This particular bill actually passed unanimously the other day, and yet had been held up by the speaker for 2 full years, where meanwhile the Senate had passed it plus 8 other bills that would help women of our state. But instead, on the Assembly side, they wanted to couple it all together with a controversial abortion expansion measure that many didn't support, including a majority in the Senate, so it would never got passed, meaning all the pieces of legislation fail. So what we're doing now is actually allowing democracy to take place by letting each bill to come to the floor, have a proper debate and discussion on the merits of the bill, and then have a vote, which is what we're here to do.
Makes sense,
so,
right?
yeah, I mean, it really actually is too much of common sense to make it anyway rational for it to be held up for so long. So I commended Speaker Hasty, and I thanked him personally for allowing this bill to come to the floor for a vote. It is a very important measure that will protect women and children who are abused, who are enslaved into a sex trade. Many who are here, been brought here from other countries with the promise of citizenship, with the promise of so much hope, and then they were brought into sex trade. So I believe this is a really important tool. And we're really building on the 2008 legislation of the Safe Harbor Act, which was the first in the nation to pass. And so we're building on that. And I think this is a very important step. And it's a great way to celebrate Women's History Month.
Well, we have your comments on the floor explaining your vote on this bill. Let's take a look at that, and we'll come back and speak further with Assemblywoman Nicole Malliotakis.
I also join my colleagues in congratulating our bill's sponsor, Amy Paulin, and Senator Lanza in the Senate for working so hard to get this bill past both houses and onto the governor's desk, where it will soon become law. There really is no better way to celebrate
Women's History Month, and although it's difficult to listen to these stories of these women and young children who have been taken advantage of and who have been enslaved into this sex trade, we are taking the steps necessary to combat it so we can eradicate it in the state once and for all, whether it's using fraud, physical injury, threats of deportation. They bully these women, these children, into this horrible lifestyle. And so here we are today, making history once again, first in the year 2008 by passing the Safe Harbor Law. And today, we are truly making history again. I congratulate the sponsors, and I have to say a special thank you to our speaker, Carl Hasty. Many of us in this room together have fought to try to get this bill to the floor for multiple years now. And without him allowing us to take this vote, allowing democracy to take its course, allowing this discussion, this debate, and this vote to take place today, we probably would not be seeing women and children protected in the future. So thank you.
You know, it's a travesty that a bill such as this has been bottled up, languishing in codes for so long, when it could have been adopted 2 years ago.
Yeah, and in the end of the day, it voted unanimously. But that actually goes to the point of why we need real reforms in this state. I mean, because when you have a bill that has so many sponsors, as this bill did, more than enough sponsors to pass.
Yeah, 125
and in the end of the day, it passed unanimously. Why is one person, the Speaker of the Assembly, allowed to hold these important pieces of legislation from coming to the floor? That should not be, and that's why we advocated for serious reforms just a few weeks ago. We want to see members' votes be published on the website in committees, the committee votes, because that's currently not accessible by the public. They should see how we debate in the committee as well. So we would like to see our committee meetings broadcast online and put in an archive. I think that these transparency measures, along with term limits for leadership positions, whether it be the Speaker, whether it be the Majority Leader, whether it be the Minority Leader, are very important. We want a rotation of ideas. We want new, fresh perspective. We just left a speakership here of 21 years. And for 21 years, all the members in the majority were afraid to speak against the Speaker because he had so much power. And so if we don't implement these reforms with the new speakership, over time we may see the same type of undemocratic things occurring in the legislature.
That kind of leads us into our next clip. There was a package, I think, of 17 rules changes you and your conference introduced to make the process more transparent and to give rank-and-file lawmakers greater input into the process.
Yeah, we have some really great ideas, and these are not ideas that are just Republican ideas. These are some ideas that have been adopted actually by the state Senate already, and some of the members across the aisle have said these are ideas that we support. But they're common sense things, whether it be term limits for leadership, whether it be more transparency so our constituents can see how we vote in Albany and how we debate in Albany on behalf of them. These types of measures are important. And one of the other things we want to see is stripping of pensions for elected officials who are convicted. No elected official should be convicted of a crime, sitting in jail, collecting pension, your taxpayer money on it's insanity. Yeah. And the fact that we haven't moved to repeal that yet is, I think, quite disgraceful, and it's a really slap in the face to the taxpayers.
You and your conference held a press conference on this very issue recently. We'll take a look at that, some of what was said there. We'll come back and we'll talk further with Assemblywoman Nicole Malliotakis.
We believe very strongly that it's important for the 18 million residents that we represent in this legislature that they have access to all our voting records, not just those votes that are taken on the floor. As you know, votes are accessible to the public through the LRS system and through the Assembly website. However, our committee votes are not accessible currently, and we believe that it's very important that those we represent have access to those votes so they know how exactly their legislator is voting when it comes to the committees, which are often closed doors without public admission. Although it is open publicly, they're not broadcast publicly. The state Senate does do live broadcasts of their committee meetings, and we believe that the State Assembly should do the same thing. So with our proposal, we will bring more transparency to the legislative process and allow the public to access those committee votes, and not only the votes on the bills, but also the votes we take to hold or not hold bills and prevent those bills from coming to the floor for a thorough debate, discussion, and democracy in action. Thank you.
Is it your sense that the other side will maybe incorporate some of what you're proposing and then include it in a bill at some point?
We're hopeful. We're hopeful, and we have, since that day when they were all shot down, every single one of these reforms, they have indicated that there's going to be more discussion, and the Speaker has indicated that after the budget he would like to see these be brought up again for a more thorough discussion. And so I'm hopeful that we're going to make some changes, because really, you know, we advocated so hard to get a new Speaker, but with the new Speaker needs to come reforms. And if we don't reform the chamber, it eventually will become the same old, no matter, because the power that one person has, the control that one person has over staff allocations or being able to hold things over members, they don't vote a certain way, I think has really, we've seen over the last X amount of years, or 21 years, way before I was here, how it becomes corrupt. And I will say also that, you know, if there's ever an argument to be made for Speaker term limits, it's that I was only 13 years old when Sheldon Silver was first elected as Speaker, and I wasn't even born when Sheldon Silver was first elected to the Assembly. So I think it just goes to show you, it puts it sort of in perspective how ridiculous it is that one person can have control of such important role for so long without any change. Yeah,
you get entrenched. And bad things can happen. Let's talk about the Port Authority. We have you on the floor of the Assembly. Let's look at what your this relates to the Port Authority and of New York and New Jersey. You want to set it up for us, and we'll come back and we'll comment further. What's this about?
Well, a couple of years ago, the Port Authority was raising tolls in our community. Our entire delegation very much opposed to that. They had done a toll study, an economic impact study, to see how the tolls would affect small businesses, particularly the container port, which provides a tremendous amount of jobs on Staten Island and brings in a lot of revenue for the state of New York. They refused to give us the results of this study. So I had filled out a FOIL request. Again, they refused to give us the results of the study. I had to actually go to New York State Supreme Court and file a lawsuit against the Port Authority in order to obtain this information, which, by the way, was funded and paid for by the toll payers themselves, mostly. So we went to court, we did win, and finally we did obtain the study, which of course showed results that we had anticipated, which is the reason why we fought so hard against the tolls, and because it does have a detrimental impact on the economy and the residents, of course. Sure. But what I'll say is that when we sued them, we had to go through all this stuff, and because they are exempt from following the Port Authority laws, the Freedom of Information laws of New York, because they're a bi-state agency. So they kind of were able to create their own code of freedom of information, which wasn't very free. And it really, when you have a board of directors creating your own code, it creates problems just like this, because they're not really willing to divulge information. So what this bill does is require both states to do just that.
We've got to go to it quickly, and we'll come back. We'll wrap things up with Assemblywoman Nicole Malliotakis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to commend the sponsor on this legislation. A couple of years ago, I had to sue the Port Authority because they refused to release information on a study that pertained to my community and the tolls. And so this is something that's certainly needed. They should be responsible and accountable to the people, and we shouldn't have to go to court to obtain information from this agency. So again, I commend the sponsor, and I'm glad that it is unanimous today. Thank you.
You need some kind of oversight, one would think, the agency.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the Port Authority needs a complete overhaul. And a matter of fact, my senator had done legislation to do just that, and the governor vetoed. Both governors vetoed it. They passed both, and that's what makes it so difficult. You have to pass legislation in both states, in both houses, and then get them signed by both governors that control the agency to begin with.
That's a process.
Yes,
and not
it's
an easy
difficult one.
Assemblywoman, nice to see you.
Thank you
for dropping by
Great
and joining us. Thank you for joining us on this edition of Assembly Calendar. We'll see you soon. I'm Ted Flint.